Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro offered an international press conference this Wednesday to provide details of the failed mercenary incursions into the country that took place this Sunday and Monday. Spain's government this Wednesday secured enough parliamentary support through last-minute negotiations to extend the country's state of emergency. More than 127 million pre-primary, primary and secondary school pupils in Eastern and Southern Africa remain at home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro offered an international press conference this Wednesday to provide details of the failed mercenary incursions into the country that took place this Sunday and Monday. He stressed that US President Donald Trump receives daily briefings on Venezuela and that his claims that the United States had nothing to do with the latest attacks are an outright lie.
It's impossible that he hadn't been informed on May 3rd on what happened in Venezuela. It was a worldwide news. It was impossible that he wasn't informed. He wasn't briefed on Monday, May 4th, on what happened. It's impossible that on Tuesday, 5th May, he wasn't briefed on what happened in Venezuela. That's impossible. That's it's the unverosimile lie.
And President Maduro offered video footage of one of the two US citizens captured this Monday alongside other mercenaries who explained how they were contracted by security firm SilverCore to participate in the preparations to illegally enter Venezuela. As stated, the objective of the mission was to capture the airport, kidnap President Maduro and take him to the United States.
Tell me about the instructions that Maduro gave to you. And which was the target?
The only instructions that I received from Jordan was to ensure that we took control of an airport for safe passage for Maduro and receiving of airplanes.
I'm going to ask you, as Venezuelan citizen, think in your condition, like American soldier, what will be your reaction if irregular forces entered in your country in order to assassinate the president?
I wouldn't like it.
Right.
That would probably mean more war.
What other tasks involve taking control of the airport?
Securing the sector, establishing outer security, communicating with the tower, bringing in planes, one of which includes one to put Maduro on and take him back to the United States.
Who commands Jordan?
President Donald Trump.
Who gave you the weapons and the tactical uniforms?
Jordan through SilverCore.
What jobs does SilverCore?
Private security contracting and consulting, known in some places as mercenary work. My responsibilities to SilverCore are written in a contract, or described in a contract, signed by Jordan Goudreau, Juan Rendon, and Juan Guaido.
And Venezuelan authorities have accused the United States and its Drug Enforcement Agency of masterminding the failed incursion into the Bolivarian Republic carried out by mercenaries with the support of drug cartels. More details in the following report.
For 1 year, the incursionists lived in 3 camps in neighboring Colombia.
It's up to us to create a new history.
About 300 deserters of the Venezuelan military and police force enlisted under the command of at least 3 former special operations soldiers from the United States.
We will train and follow your tactical plan to help us free our country from tyranny. You can count on us.
On the front lines is 43-year-old Jordan Godreau, a highly decorated 3-time Bronze Star recipient for courage in deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan as a Special Forces medic.
We want to thank you, Mr. Jordan, for helping us work towards the liberation of Venezuela.
On its website, Godreau's private security company, SilverCore USA, boasts of conducting operations in more than 50 countries. Godreau aligned himself to U.S. President Donald Trump's incessant need to topple President Maduro and was soon introduced to Trump's longtime bodyguard Keith Schilder through someone who worked in private security. Both attended a meeting with opposition member Juan Guaido in the United States.
I've asked my team to update our plans to reopen the U.S. Embassy in Caracas so that we are ready to go. As soon as Maduro steps aside, I am confident that we will raise that flag again in Caracas.
Operation Gideon saw the arrest or assassination of President Nicolas Maduro and the seizure of Caracas in 96 hours. However, at the first sign of failure, the lead incursionist had this to say.
Our men are continuing to fight right now. Our units have been activated in the south, west, and east of Venezuela.
By that time, the Bolivarian forces had already killed 8 of the mercenaries. Authorities also revealed that one of the men who was captured confessed to being a DEA agent.
I spoke to Captain Antonio Sequea with Med in Bogota, and he presented a military operation that was organized by Donald Trump and his government.
Later, 2 former U.S. soldiers were captured in the coastal state of Aragua.
One of them is Luke Alexander Denman, war veteran.
The U.S. citizens are from the state of Texas, one from Dallas, the other from Austin, and were part of a contract signed by opposition member Juan Guaido to invade Venezuela.
Yeah, you can do the sign. Okay, he signed in every page. Like I said,
Guaido first dismissed the armed incursion against his country as a montage of the government. Once neutralized, hours later he began to demand respect for the human rights of the mercenaries.
They were waiting for them to kill them. Who are those bodies they showed in the state of Vargas?
After absolute silence for more than 48 hours, Donald Trump denied any connection to the plot to overthrow Nicolas Maduro.
I just got information, nothing to do with our government, but I just got information on that. So we'll find out. We just heard about it. But whatever it is, we'll let you know. But it has nothing to do with our government.
U.S. media have dubbed Operation Gideon the Venezuelan Bay of Pigs, in reference to the first great defeat of the United States in Latin America when its mercenaries invaded Cuba by entering Playa Girón.
Cuba's National Director of Epidemiology, Dr. Francisco Duran, this Wednesday highlighted a downward trend in new COVID-19 cases in the country. The specialist explained that this was the 5th day in which the epidemic curve declined, but warned that the country couldn't let its guard down as there was still a risk of another increase in cases. In the last 3 days, the number of patients who have recovered and been discharged from health facilities has surpassed the number of new positive cases. In this sense, Dr. Duran called to strengthen the health measures to prevent an increase in the spread of the virus. Cuba has now reported 1,703 confirmed cases and 69 fatalities. Mexican health authorities reported 236 new COVID-19 deaths this Wednesday, bringing the death toll to 2,507. Meanwhile, over 26,000 positive cases have been reported and more than 16,000 people have recovered from the virus.
We are reinforcing measures in the areas most affected by the pandemic. For instance, today we are sending out the ventilators that arrived to Tijuana yesterday, and both the Marine Plan and the DN3 in Baja California enter into force, and this will allow us to offer care to everyone who may need it. That's what we are doing.
Brazilian health authorities confirmed a further 600 COVID-19 deaths on Tuesday. The authorities stressed that the fatalities were registered between May 3rd and May 5th. The COVID-19 death toll in Brazil has now surpassed 8,000, the sixth highest in the world. Brazilian health authorities also highlighted that at least 7,000 new cases were reported on Tuesday, for a total of more than 100,000 confirmed cases in the country. Brazil is the epicenter of the pandemic in Latin America. Meanwhile, President Jair Bolsonaro's government continues to insist on easing the restrictions and resuming economic activities. It's come to light that agents of the private security contractor behind the attempted mercenary incursion into Venezuela on May 4th and 5th were based in Brazil during the 2018 election, in which the US-backed far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro came to power in an already controversial circumstances. More in the following report by our correspondent in Brazil, Brian Meir.
A breaking story published in Brazil Wire, the English-language news portal about Brazil, by journalist Natalia Urban, shows that SilverCore USA, the mercenary company that has ties to the Donald Trump administration, which was hired by Juan Guaido to engage in the failed coup d'etat attempt that happened yesterday in Venezuela, was operating in Brazil during the 2018 presidential elections, which saw the rise of right-wing extremist Jair Bolsonaro in the most tumultuous election in Brazilian history. After the leading candidate, who was polling at double the support of anyone else in the race, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, was removed from the election on frivolous corruption charges with no material evidence. Now, at the time of the elections, there were over 50 violent attacks committed across the country by Bolsonaro supporters, including several murders. According to social media postings on Instagram that were subsequently erased, SilverCorp executives claim that they were leaving Brazil after an unspecified amount of time, 11 days after the first round election. So the question is, what were they doing in Brazil? What were they working on, and who hired them?
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Spain's government this Wednesday secured enough parliamentary support through last-minute negotiations to extend the country's state of emergency. The strict lockdown has brought the outbreak under control, with a daily death toll of 244 recorded on Wednesday, far below the peaks of nearly 1,000 a day registered in early April. But it has also devastated the economy and led to huge job losses. The parliamentary debate on how to organise the exit from the lockdown underlines the divisive political environment in a country that has faced 4 national elections in 4 years and where the government must battle for support. This will be the 4th 2-week extension to the state of emergency. Spain has reported a total of more than 25,000 COVID-19 deaths and over 250,000 cases, the second highest number in the world.
Today we have received, as I said before with relief, that there has been only a little over 0.35% of new diagnoses, that is, 685 compatriots, that were registered in Spain yesterday, but we understand the risk we are still running. And that is what I would like to share with you, ladies and gentlemen. Let us think that a single person infected from the extreme east of Asia endangered all of humanity in less than 100 days.
The number of COVID-19 cases and fatalities continues to rise in Italy, but at a slower rate. According to the Civil Protection Department, this Wednesday Italy had a COVID-19 death toll of 29,684. Meanwhile, over 214,000 cases have been confirmed so far, while over 93,000 people have recovered from the virus, including 8,014 reported in the last 24 hours, a record number of recoveries for a single day. Another positive sign is that for the first time, the number of recovered patients exceeds that of those who are still under treatment. The United Kingdom has drawn up a 3-stage plan to ease the coronavirus lockdown that was first imposed at the end of March. The government was scheduled to review the lockdown by May 7th. However, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stated that he is worried about triggering a second deadly spike in cases by lifting measures too soon. The first phase will involve small shops reopening alongside outdoor workplaces, and the second will involve large shopping centres reopening, with more people encouraged to go into work, according to official sources. Meanwhile, the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, has blamed the Prime Minister for the mishandling of the health crisis that has seen the UK ranked second in the world in terms of its COVID-19 death toll, only surpassed by the United States.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, of course, every death is...
US President Donald Trump announced on Tuesday that the White House Coronavirus Task Force will wind down as the country moves into a second phase that focuses on the aftermath of the outbreak. Despite growing evidence that the pandemic is still raging, President Trump confirmed plans that the White House will start moving coordination of the US response to the coronavirus to federal agencies in late May. Trump informed that Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx, doctors who have assumed a high profile during weeks of nationally televised news briefings on the pandemic, would continue to advise the White House after the task force is dismantled. More than 73,000 people have died from COVID-19 in the United States, representing by far the highest death toll in the world. Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday chaired a meeting of the ruling Communist Party to discuss ways of improving systems for regular epidemic prevention and control as the country begins to return to normal. Meanwhile, Chinese authorities have responded to claims by US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that the coronavirus originated in a lab in the Chinese city of Wuhan.
Mr. Pompeo has said a lot recently. He said that he has enormous evidence. Then show us. But I have seen reports that WHO officials also said that the US has not shown any evidence to WHO so far. And according to the recent reports, it seems that the senior officials of the US have changed their mind on the evidence. Mr. Pompeo repeatedly spoke up, but he cannot present any evidence. How can he come up with evidence? Because he doesn't have any. So I think this matter should be handed to scientists and medical professionals and not politicians who lie for their own domestic political ends.
And we're taking one final break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. More than 127 million pre-primary, primary and secondary school pupils in Eastern and Southern Africa remain at home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Plans were for schools to reopen this week, but several countries have decided to extend their closures. In response, the United Nations Children's Fund has announced advance support during this unprecedented education crisis, while advocating for the safe reopening of schools that adhere to safety guidance. Through partners, UNICEF has already supported 21 governments with funding for remote learning and preparedness to reopen schools. However, even with the alternative learning measures being rolled out by African governments, supported by UNICEF and its partners, tens of millions of children will not be reached as they do not have internet access. Nigeria's COVID-19 Presidential Task Force announced a month-long extension of the country's flight ban during its daily briefing on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the first of a series of repatriation flights landed in the country today. The Emirates flight returned 265 Nigerian nationals to the capital, Abuja, who had been stranded in the United Arab Emirates due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the flight had to return to Dubai after takeoff as a woman gave birth on board and developed complications. Mother and baby were later reported to be doing well. Nigeria has reported almost 3,000 coronavirus cases and 98 fatalities. Though a major threat to human lives, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to inspire innovations among research scientists, virologists and other professionals, as seen in Ghana. The Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research of the University of Ghana has been the foremost institution in efforts to combat the novel coronavirus since Ghana reported its first case on March 12th. Director of the institute, Professor Abraham Anang, has claimed that Ghana is just weeks away from developing drugs to treat COVID-19. The institution was established in 1979 in memory of a Japanese scientist, Hideo Noguchi, who died of yellow fever in 1928, a year after arriving to Ghana to help fight the fever. The institute remains one of the leading centres for scientific testing and medical research on various epidemics. An enormous sandstorm over Niger's capital saw a towering wall of dust sweep over the city, creating an impressive and menacing spectacle that was captured on film by eyewitnesses. The immense storm swept through Niamey earlier this week, shrouding the city in an eerie reddish darkness. While there are no reports of damage or injuries, dust storms are thought to drive surges in some illnesses like bacterial meningitis. According to research published in 2016, the high winds across North Africa from Eritrea to Senegal can carry particles, including infectious bacteria, deep into the respiratory tract, suggesting sandstorms could play a role in the outbreaks of some diseases. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani warned of a crushing response if the United States continues its efforts to prolong a UN Security Council arms embargo on Tehran that is set to expire later this year. Rouhani referred to the moves by Washington, which last month circulated a draft UN resolution that would indefinitely extend the embargo set to expire in October as part of the 2015 nuclear deal between 6 major powers and Iran, which the Trump administration pulled out of in 2018, sparking global criticism. In his speech to the nation this Wednesday, President Rouhani stressed that if the US wants to return to the deal, it should lift all the sanctions against Iran and compensate the country for their reimposition. The Israeli regime has once again launched air and artillery attacks on the northern and central areas of the besieged Gaza Strip. Palestinian security sources reported that early Wednesday morning, Israeli artillery targeted surveillance post of the armed wing of the Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, in the northern Gaza Strip. The Israeli army claimed the strikes were a response to a rocket attack launched from the occupied Palestinian territories. At the same time, Israeli aircraft carried out attacks against Palestinian resistance posts in Juha ad-Dik in central Gaza. The new attacks on the besieged Gaza Strip come at a time when the novel coronavirus has begun to spread and Palestinians are faced with a lack of necessary equipment and supplies to deal with the deadly virus. In the midst of the coronavirus lockdown in France, Parisians have taken to their windows and balconies to clap every evening to thank healthcare workers for their ongoing efforts. On the 51st day of the lockdown, saxophonist Pierre played a Charles Aznavour song to support the country's cultural sector, which has been devastated by the pandemic. And we finish this news brief with a clip of the performance. Remember, you can get all the latest news on our website as well as on social media. For TeleSur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.